Hey folks, welcome back to your channel Relationship Anthology. This is your narrator John and I hope you all having a wonderful day. In today's story, OP found out that his wife cheated on him multiple times then took their daughter with her after she fled to another state. Thanks to OP's lawyer, he was able to get full custody of his daughter and now his wife is homeless after she tried mooching off a house that she did not own. Now let's get into today's story.
So I've already begun divorce proceedings with my soon-to-be ex-wife. I live in Kentucky and my soon-to-be ex-wife is currently in Florida with our 14-month-old child. This is a very long story with so much drama, and this is also a throwaway account because my soon-to-be ex-wife knows my account. I normally don't post online about myself, but I really feel so alone at this moment that I could really use some support. So, a bit of backstory. When I was 18, I was in an abusive relationship with a woman and we had a child together. Despite using birth control, she cheated on me multiple times. But the kicker was she ended up cheating on me with my best friend, we'll call him James, and I was absolutely destroyed by this. I stopped talking to my friend for years, but eventually I pulled myself up and reached out to this friend. He talked about how he was so incredibly sorry and I forgave him in my mind. At the time, I had let this woman alienate me from all of my close friends and I just didn't want to lose my oldest childhood friend because of this. Sadly, this becomes relevant later, so fast forward to the current day. I've since gotten custody of my 13-year-old son and was happily married. My wife comes from an extremely wealthy family, whereas I grew up impoverished and struggling with simple things like food and security. My parents were divorced and I lived with my mom, who received disability benefits at 30. I had a good job running a land surveying operation with my dad, who was a licensed surveyor. My wife was going to school for her bachelor's and I was working full-time, while also working on getting my associate's degree. Things seemed relatively fine, but now looking back at it, I'm noticing all these red flags that I ignored because I was in love. My wife, she struggled in school a lot. It seemed strange to me that she was struggling so hard while I was getting good grades and working full-time. She used to get very upset with me for my good grades, so I would lie to her and tell her I got C's when I was really getting a nearly 4.0 GPA. I would try to encourage her and help her with homework, but this eventually led to me just doing her homework for her because she was too paralyzed to do it herself. When COVID hit, my job suffered and I began making less money. We still were doing fine financially, but it was less. Even though she was on birth control, she got pregnant and we had a child together. When she was pregnant, this was when things first began taking a turn for the worst. Her dad died of COVID about 2 months before our daughter was born, and there was a lot of grief and mourning. Our daughter was born in March of 2021 and I took time off work to be as involved as possible with my daughter. I really wanted to have a strong bond with her, so I took months off, and when I did return to work it was only part-time. My wife was suffering from postpartum and I had read online that the best thing to do when your partner is suffering from postpartum is to help as much as possible, so I did. I would routinely do things for my wife like make her breakfast in bed, and I took great care of my daughter. My wife has always been awful at doing chores. She never liked to clean, do dishes, or cook dinner. So we would pay people to come and clean our house. But since I was making less money, now these responsibilities fell on me. But these were all things I mostly enjoyed, so I happily did them. But after a while things started to weigh on me. I began going to therapy. I was initially diagnosed with bipolar, but that diagnosis was changed to ADHD and I'm now receiving proper treatment. My wife began doing very concerning things. She would accuse me of having an affair with my therapist. If I went to work, she would demand that I come home to help with our baby. She would tell me things like sometimes when she got really frustrated with our baby and she would have to fight the urge to shake her. I couldn't believe these things and I was scared she was becoming much angrier than usual, which she's always been one to have anger issues, but things were getting really bad. There were several instances where she would do something downright horrible in front of my family and son, and I would have to apologize on her behalf and try to mend relationships. But going into detail on those would make my already very long story even longer. So problems came to the surface in July of 2021 when I woke up at 4 in the morning and she was screaming at our 4-month-old and rocking her, in my opinion, too hard to go to sleep because she was crying. I sat straight up and told her to give me our baby and I would take care of her. My wife then got kind of sheepish, like she was just caught. I told her she was scaring our child and she needed to give her to me. She did, and then she went to sleep. I took care of the baby and laid her back down, but I couldn't go back to sleep. I was really struggling to come to terms with what just happened. I went to work that day and when I came home she wanted to confront me and defend herself. And I would just tell her that I couldn't talk to her at that moment. I just wanted to take a shower and take my dog to his vet appointment and we could talk about it later. She followed me around and I kept asking her to just leave me alone. I ended up going outside and she followed yelling at me. I told her that she had anger issues, that she didn't care about anyone but herself and needed to act better. She stepped forward and slapped me hard. I didn't hit her back or anything. I just kind of slumped and said, "Look what you've done now." Then I went upstairs and sat on the toilet kind of crying but mostly in shock. She followed me up the stairs and I remember this very clearly because she never apologized. She was just trying to explain how she got so defensive and how what I said just made her so angry because it was similar to her abusive parents. I couldn't believe she wasn't apologizing and instead was defending herself. I didn't take my shower or anything and I just left to take our dog to the vet. While I was at the vet, she contacted some of my family to take her to a mental hospital so she could get treatment. When I got back, she was gone, was headed to the hospital, and she was just texting me telling me how sorry she was. She got diagnosed with postpartum and it took time, but I tried my best to forgive her and be understanding. When she got back, things were somewhat normal for a bit, but after about 3 days, she asked me why I seemed withdrawn, and I just said something along the lines of, "Well, it's hard for me to cope with the fact that you hit me." She started telling me that years ago I threw a hairbrush at her and she forgave me for it. I don't remember ever doing this, but all of a sudden this was being brought up, and I would have to apologize for it to placate her, even though I didn't remember doing it. Now I'm understanding that it never happened. Well, a few months later, her stepmother in Florida was diagnosed with lung cancer and offered to buy us a $400,000 house in Florida. Now I live in Kentucky, so we would have to move down. It was exciting because my old friend James lived in Florida as well and I would be able to see him again. We bought the house, but things became troublesome with negotiating the move with my 13-year-old son's mother, and I completely understood her point of view. I began reconsidering the move, not wanting to give up my son. My wife began telling me that it's up to my son who he wants to live with, and if he wanted to live with his mom instead of us, that's his choice, and I needed to give him that option. I was resistant to this at first, but she told me, her mom and then her therapist agreed with her, and so eventually I conceded and gave him the option of coming with us to Florida or staying with his mom. He said he didn't want us to move, but if we did, he would want to stay with his mother up here. Things got weird after he told me that my wife got extremely upset and began yelling at him through the bathroom door while he was using the bathroom. He went upstairs and secluded himself to his bedroom. I felt terrible, and then my wife begins blaming it on me, saying she never told me to give him that option. She insisted that she never said anything like that, and I eventually just gave up. So things kind of settled down for a bit and my wife barely managed to get her bachelor's degree. She got in trouble for plagiarism, so afterward I was writing papers for her more and taking her tests. She graduated with around a 2.4 GPA. She also began taking Prozac and she said it would help with her anger issues, and to be honest, I thought that she was improving. We began making a lot of plans since the business was slowing down here, and my father began working on getting his land surveying license in Florida. He ended up landing a pretty decent job, with his first day being May 16th. We all went down to Florida at the end of March, and my father, son, and I came back up to let my son finish out the school year while my wife stayed in Florida with our 1-year-old daughter so she could visit her elderly stepmother with cancer because she probably doesn't have too much time left. Again, things seemed relatively fine. I thought my wife was in love with me and I was in love with her. I was willing to give up my son to let her be closer to her family. My dad and I quit our jobs up here at the beginning of May and he began prepping himself to go down there. He was going to stay with us for a little bit until he sold his houses up here so he could buy the empty lot next to our Florida home and build himself a house. My dad got down to Florida on Friday, May 6th, and on Saturday, May 7th, my wife calls to tell me that she doesn't love me anymore and that she hasn't loved me for a long time. I'm devastated at this point. I got the impression that my wife was enjoying my pain and it was slightly off-putting. She and I had been together about 6 years, married for 3 of those years, and it seemed hard to swallow. That evening I asked her if she still wanted me to come down and she said sure. I asked her what we were going to do about our daughter together if things didn't work out. She said she wouldn't keep her from me, but she was going to stay in Florida with her. I was completely devastated. I reached out to friends and family and they were pretty supportive. Turns out my wife had been having an affair and had texted a friend about it, which she screenshotted and sent to me. I immediately contacted a lawyer to see what my legal rights were and began divorce proceedings. My wife on Tuesday, May 10th allowed our daughter to get into her psych meds and she had to contact poison control and rinse her mouth. But around 9 in the morning she asked my dad, who was now down there, to watch our daughter so she could go have a me day. She was gone until around midnight. While she was out, she went to see my friend James 2 hours away, and the affair went from an emotional affair to a physical affair. My dad moved out the next day. She didn't come clean about this affair until I figured it out. My wife kept trying to talk to me about how she just wanted me to choose her and how this wasn't sudden or anything. I told her that I was even willing to give up my son for her and that she was chosen, but now I'm not willing to do that. Turns out, she was just trying to absolve her guilt. So here I am. I don't have my job anymore. I don't have my child. I don't have my father around to rely on. She is our car down in Florida. I'm not the homeowner like I expected to be, and I had to pay for my lawyer using a credit card. There is a silver lining though, and that is due to the laws regarding child custody. The state that determines the custody of our 14-month-old daughter is Kentucky and not Florida, so she has to go to court and try to convince the courts to let her move with our daughter down to Florida. Meanwhile, my lawyer seems fairly confident that we can get sole custody. The soon-to-be ex-wife is wanting to work things out, and I'm just not talking to her at all. She keeps saying that she never wanted a divorce and that I went too far. She's since reached out to my dad and told my dad that if we work things out, I have to remove my name off the deed to the Florida home, so the ownership is entirely hers. I know that her mother will always hate me because she thinks that I'm a terrible person, but she just wishes I would come to Florida so we can work things out. She refuses to come back to Kentucky unless I drop the divorce proceedings. I have no intention of working things out. The worst thing about all this is that I can't bring myself to cry. I want to cry so badly, but when I do, I just feel guilty for letting myself fall into this situation. If I hadn't reached out to James, then perhaps my wife would have never cheated like she did. What's worse is that I know she did it to hurt me. She knew about mine and James' history and picked the one person in the entire world to have an affair with. That could deliver such a devastating blow to my confidence.
Hi everyone, this is the narrator again. That was the end of part 1 and we are about to start the update of the story. But before that, I would request you to subscribe if you like the content to show your support. This would mean a lot to me, and will encourage me to work harder to represent the best visual quality. Now, let's get into the update.
I know a lot of people have been asking for updates, so I figured I would make a post to update everyone who cares. So, first, the custody issues. My soon-to-be ex-wife was granted 2 continuances, one in June and one in July, and the hearing was scheduled for last Monday. Luckily, on Friday before the court hearing, she and I reached a temporary custody agreement that will last until the permanent one is determined towards the end of our divorce. Essentially, my daughter is going to be spending a month with me and then a month with her. We'll be exchanging her at the airports. This is beneficial to me since she had delayed the court hearing twice. It would now be difficult to claim, and she's an unfit mother in a custody hearing. Since we had no custody agreement prior, her moving away is not in violation of any custodial arrangements. So in order to have my daughter move back to Kentucky, I would have to prove that I should be awarded primary custody. It wasn't impossible, but it was a bit of a long shot. Now when permanent custody is being determined, she and I already have 50-50 custody established. And as long as there are no incidents while she's staying with me, we will be on equal footing for when the primary custodian is determined. I told her that if she wanted to stay in Florida until our daughter is older and started going to school or her stepmother passes away, I would agree to it as long as she agreed to move back here afterwards. I can't think of any healthier compromise. If she doesn't agree to that, then a judge is going to have to determine it. Also, and most importantly, I get to see my daughter. I'm so excited. Second point, I have a very good job now. It's a government job and I work in the engineering department. I'm really happy there. The pay and benefits are all better than my previous job. I feel like they're very appreciative of me. They even had me training someone on my first day, and they're considering getting me an intern. Now, it's gone a long way to helping my mental well-being. My soon-to-be ex-wife attempted to hoover me while we agreed on custody. At this point, I have consistently gone to therapy for about 16 months. Man, I was prepared for it and handled myself very well. I don't want to get back with her. She justifies everything she's done to me by claiming that I was verbally abusive, and I'm not a verbally abusive person. I would tell her that I remember things differently than she does, and that's okay. I definitely had people-pleasing tendencies during our relationship. But I've made a lot of effort to overcome this. I'm not one to let my anger get the best of me now. I'm having no problem establishing boundaries with people, and it has made my entire life much better. I'm no longer even interested in a reason why she did such terrible things to me. I used to try and make sense of things, but you can't make sense out of nonsense. For a while in June, I was very distraught because I would dwell on it. I would find myself thinking, no matter how long I live, I doubt anybody will ever do something so awful to me again. I voiced that to my therapist a couple of times, and she would always tell me that at least I got it out of the way when I was 33 years old, rather than having it happen 20 years from now. Initially, that offered very little comfort, but as I'm rebuilding my life basically from scratch, her observation has really become true. I feel like I can basically handle anything life throws at me because I've already gone through hell and came back not only alive but a much better person than I used to be. While my soon-to-be ex-wife was talking to me over the phone that day, we reached an agreement. She asked me why I didn't try to reconcile. I told her reconciliation is a privilege given by the betrayed spouse, and that to me I would have considered reconciliation if I had seen her make efforts to reconcile. The first one being that she either had to come back up here or cut off ties with her affair partner. She did neither. She told me her and James were no longer seeing each other. I asked her when she stopped seeing him. She asked, does it matter? I said it didn't matter. I don't want to reconcile, so I actually don't care. I'm not here to give her instructions on how to reconcile. At the same time, I also told her that if she had an affair with anybody else in the world, I may have been more willing to settle on reconciliation. I told her, what you did to me, you either did it in a way to make this as painful as you possibly could for me, or you did it with complete disregard for how much it would hurt me. I actually can't decide which is more evil. I never use the term evil in any regular context, but I struggled coming up with any other word to describe it. I want to touch on one thing: that my son is extremely happy that we're getting divorced. He and I have become even closer in the past few months. He asked me if I knew my soon-to-be ex-wife was crazy before I filed for divorce, and I didn't really know what to say. LOL. I'm so happy to be a positive influence in his life. My lawyer is awesome, but expensive. He's been doing this for about 30 years, and he told me that my case is the most bizarre one he's ever seen. I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but he cares and is straight with me. I couldn't ask for more. Aside from all that, I reached out to an old crush of mine that I hadn't talked to for about 15 years. She and I had feelings for each other back then, but I was with my son's mother at the time, and as horrible as she was to me, I could never bring myself to cheat on my son's mom and disrupt his life. I told her that then, and she was very respectful of that boundary, and it's something I always appreciated about her. Truth be told, she helped me feel a bit better when I was really going through some awful time. So I reached out to her with no expectations of anything, just to kind of dip my toes, get ready to talk to people more, and eventually start trying to date again. Funny enough, she's going through divorce too. Her ex was a narcissist as well. I asked her about her divorce and she told me about it, but she never asked me about mine. She told me it was because she didn't want to pry, and if I wanted to talk about it, I was welcome to. I was extremely grateful for that because it's not something I wanted to talk about. I was dreading dating again in general because I have so much baggage, and I really would rather focus on what's important in my life. I literally had written down a checklist of the things I would look for in a partner going forward, and she has been nothing but green flags. As a side note, her story has a shocking amount of similarities to mine. I've noticed I have a very hard time allowing myself to be vulnerable after all the pain I've been through. I'm working on that. This woman is extremely nice and understanding with me, and it has made me want to be vulnerable. I've talked to her a bit about stuff, but I also told her I want to take things slow, and she's got so much on her plate as well. If either of us ever thinks things are getting too serious, we should let each other know. I told her I would be fine with it. She agreed. It made me happy. We don't even talk every day. I'm content no matter how that relationship unfolds. I can say that she's fostered a positive impact on my life, and I've grown emotionally just from talking to her. After so much abuse and trauma, I'm slowly coming to the realization that relationships don't have to be as awful as I'm used to. You can have a strong relationship with someone for no reason other than you like the other person and company. You can build each other up and complement each other while still being your own person. Anyway, that's about all I got. If you got through all this, thanks for reading it all.
Hi guys, this is the narrator again. OP. Hearing the update you posted was music to my ears. I am so happy for how well you were able to bounce back from such a tough situation to deal with your ex-wife, who sounds like an absolute psycho. I'm really hoping you can get full custody of your daughter. A woman that crazy does not need to be supervising any child. It's also great to hear that you met another woman in your life that seems perfect for you. I think you may have found your soulmate. OP, as you mentioned, there will always be a light at the end of the tunnel, and truly you have finally found it. Keep on striving, OP. Thank you everyone for taking the time to listen to today's story. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already done so, and comment below on what your thoughts are on today's story. I hope you all have a great day ahead. Bye for now.